Oh, you knew I was gonna have to come back to this stuff. You know, we're a ways away from new Doctor Who episodes, but I still like to talk about it, and I figured out some more lists that I can pop your way. I'm gonna list the top 10 stories for the 9th, 10th, and 11th Doctors. A reminder for the way I do this, I count two-parters as a single story. In case you're wondering why I'm only doing 9, 10, 11, it's because I haven't seen everything of the other Doctors, and I don't feel that it's fair for me to try and do a top rank when there are episodes I haven't seen, and in the case of some of the older Doctors, huge swaths of their stuff that I haven't seen. I like to think I've got a pretty decent knowledge of the classic era, but not enough to do that kind of list on those Doctors. Not yet, at any rate. I may get to it. Quick warning on this, I am going to talk about these episodes very freely, so consider that a spoiler warning. But we're going to start with the 9th Doctor, Christopher Eccleston, and remember how I mentioned I count two-parters as one story? Well, since I do that, that actually means there are only 10 stories for the 9th Doctor, which means I'm just going to rank all of them in order. So starting at the bottom, we have Father's Day. I know what this episode was trying to go for, and I get the emotional weight that it wanted to have, but for me, it just didn't work. Rose's whole thing with her father, for me, felt like it came out of nowhere. It didn't feel properly built up and established. She went so harshly against what the Doctor had been telling her she could and couldn't do. It just made me annoyed with her as a character. What the ultimate resolution of the episode was going to end up being, I saw coming basically as soon as she pushed him out of the way, that the episode was going to have to end with Pete dying. I mean, that was obvious. So it wasn't a build-up. It was just me waiting. Okay, when are they finally going to realize that's what has to happen? And it didn't help that the Reapers really just felt like a ripoff of the Langoliers. And you know what? It wasn't a great idea when Stephen King did it either. Moving up the list, number 9, The Unquiet Dead. I don't have as many sort of issues with this one as I have with Father's Day. It was just kind of a dull episode for me. Nothing really clicked on the level that it should have. I mean, you know, the guy who's playing Charles Dickens is fine. There's nothing wrong with him, and the setting's okay, I guess, but it was sort of, it's right off the bat, it started my not being particularly big fan of the historical episodes dealing with famous people. That sort of started right off the bat with this. Again, it's not a horrible episode, but there's really nothing that I can point to where I'm like, that's the best moment in that episode. It just is. Number 8, The Long Game. Now, again, a bit of a dull episode, but there's enough things in this episode that I like that I'm going to put it above the others. One being Simon Pegg, and honestly, I'm biased. I just like Simon Pegg. I'll completely cop to that. But I also actually really like the use of Adam as a completely crap companion as a way to sort of highlight why Rose is actually a decent companion. And at that point, I kind of needed that because I was having a hard time sort of going with, why is the Doctor with her? Why doesn't he ditch her and find somebody better? Oh, okay, not everybody can handle this. Cool. I mean, the overall story is okay, it's decent. The Jaggerfest is a bit of a toss away. I talked about him when I did my worst villains list. So it's not a great episode, but there are enough little highlights in it that, you know, I'll still go back and watch it again. Number 7, Aliens in London and World War III. Two-parter, and there's some highs and some lows in this one, and it won't go higher because the lows do drag it down a bit, and the lows largely have to do with the Slitheen. With both the design, I don't like the babyface design on them, and the farting. Why with the farting? That said, as much as that stuff just sort of bothers me, I think the Doctor has some of his best moments when he gets angry at the soldier for shooting the pig creature and just yelling at the soldier, "It was scared!" Or when he's just standing there and they're throwing information about the Slitheen at him, he's just going, narrows it down, and he's just taking the information and filtering it until he gets to his answer. I love that. I mean, that's really what pulls up this episode. Christopher Eccleston has some of his best moments and best stuff in this episode. And while it does not completely negate the stuff that isn't as good, it doesn't work as well, it does lift the whole experience up a bit. Number 6, Boomtown. Here we have again with the Slitheen. Thankfully, the farting was toned down a little bit, and we get something a bit quieter, a bit more intimate, and I like the back and forth between the Doctor and the one remaining Slitheen. I like that interaction, I like that relationship, and I like how she sort of coaxes out the Doctor's darkness a little bit. So I like that and all those moments. The conclusion is a little weird, a little cheesy, and the episode itself doesn't feel like it has a ton of lasting impact, but I like the overall vibe of it. Number 5, Rose. Again, largely buoyed by Christopher Eccleston. Now, honestly, Christopher Eccleston had sold me almost as soon as he was on the screen. Really, the moment where I was completely on board and going, this guy is terrific, it's the moment after he gets Rose out of the building, then he opens the door again, pops his head back out, he's holding the bomb, he asks her name, he goes, nice to meet you, Rose. Run for your life. And just that fun and that sort of joy in the adventure I really loved. And again, Eccleston himself is really what lifts this episode up, because this episode did not sell Rose to me particularly well. And the use of the autons, the Nestine, is decent. It works okay, but there's also some goofy stuff. The garbage can eating Mickey is weird and kind of cartoonish. But, the Doctor, holding Rose's hand and, talking about what he is experiencing, just standing there. It just really works. And as I said, the episode didn't completely sell me on Rose, but it did sell me on the Doctor right out the gate. Number 4, the end of the world. Now we're getting into some really good stuff. This was a really excellent episode to have as the second episode, because it just goes bonkers and it throws all these aliens at you, some of which are just insane. I mean, the face of Bo, a walking tree, Cassandra. It's just a wonderful, quirky, fun mix of creatures and aliens. It's a cool setting and immediately, sort of gives Rose a wake-up call for just how big the universe is and how the world she lives in is not eternal as much as she has always thought it is. And again, the Doctor himself just gets a lot of great moments. And I like Cassandra as a villain. I like her better here than when they decided to bring her back. It was a bit contrived, but she works well. I love the irony of her character. I know I didn't rank her that high when I did my recurring villains, but that largely had to do with her second appearance. Her first one is solid. And it also does a really good job of emphasizing the Doctor's life is dangerous. What Rose saw happen to and around him that first episode, not a fluke. This is how the guy lives day to day. Number 3, Bad Wolf and the Parting of Ways. This one, it had a rough place to start out from, because the reality and game show parodies at the front end of this thing don't work for me. And again, it's one of those things that just feels beneath a show like this. It's just too goofy. And I kind of just chalk that up to first season finding a footing in a lot of ways, because stuff like that, or the garbage can eating Mickey, or the farting Slytherin, the show kind of got over all that once it moved on to second season and then on from there. But the way everything built up to the reveal of the Dalek fleet, the Dalek Emperor, I really love. Just sort of emphasizing that the Doctor, he is going to not pull the trigger. That's just not who he is. It's who he absolutely does not want to be. And this episode has actually kind of gotten better in my estimation thanks to later episodes, because at first the whole Bad Wolf thing, when she takes the essence of the TARDIS into herself, I didn't like. It was very Deus Ex Machina. She opens up the TARDIS and suddenly she can fix everything. But sort of later nuances to that, and finding out her bringing back Jack was not as good as, hey, you're alive again. Like, she kind of did him a disservice, and she left him with a massive burden of near immortality. And then with Bad Wolf itself, particularly in what happened with the Day of the Doctor and having Rose come back as that form, really it elevated that whole thing and it brought it all full circle to a point that I'm now much more okay with it going back in that early episode. Number 2, Dalek. How do you make a rolling trash can with a plunger for a hand scary? This is how you do it. This show had to sell the Daleks from scratch. And the Daleks on paper are ridiculous. But this episode was so carefully constructed, it was meticulously put together to emphasize how dangerous these things are. And it's just one Dalek and it executes it perfectly. And of course, just the rage and the darkness that it brings out of the Doctor, and Eccleston just losing his cool and screaming at the thing. It's just a wonderful thing. It's one of the best episodes of the show, but it is not my number 1 for the 9th Doctor's run. That one has to go unequivocally to The Empty Child and The Doctor Dances. There is nothing I don't love about this episode. I love Captain Jack Harkness, his introduction and how he's used. I love how Rose sort of, in a way, almost pits him and the Doctor against each other a little bit in a sort of playful, flirty way. So she works for me much better in this episode than she does in some of her earlier ones. The Doctor himself, that moment at the end of the episode where he's begging to please let it work, and then it does, and he calls out, "Everybody lives." Not only is that a wonderful, triumphant episode, but you feel the weight of all the times when not everybody lived in the way that he delivers that. It's just phenomenal. And of course, the villain, the empty child, who was at the top of my one-time villains list, creeped the hell out of me. It is so disturbing to me that something that has no firm grasp of what its power is and what it can do, but can just utterly destroy you. You know, it's a child. Set aside the alien aspect to it. Just a small child doesn't have the fully developed understanding of life, death, all the morals. All it knows is just the basic guidelines of what a parent is given it. It doesn't have its own moral center yet. So a child with the power that thing had, that is terrifying. And just everything about this episode I love. It is one of my favorites of any Doctor Who. So that's my ranking for the 9th Doctor's adventures, from worst to best. When I come back and do 10th and 11th Doctor, it'll be more of a legitimate top 10, because in both cases they had more than just 10 stories. So what was your favorite 9th Doctor adventure? Whatever it was, drop something down in the comments and let's talk about it. Until next time, this council is adjourned.